Hey everybody, welcome to Conversations in the Kitchen. My name is Judy Donnelly. I'm the Nutrition Program Coordinator at the Dempsey Center. And I am joined today by Dr. Nicolette Erickson. Dr. Erickson is a medical oncologist who attended the Medical College of Virginia and did her oncology training at the University of Virginia, which is out in Charlottesville. She moved to Maine in 1994 and has been practicing ever since at CMMC. She sees patients in Lewiston, Rumford, and Bridgeton. So welcome, Dr. Erickson. It's great to have you with us.
Thanks, Judy.
So Conversations in the Kitchen, and I have to tell you that we just named this little series yesterday. Maureen Higgins and I kind of pulled together and tried to figure out what we wanted to call this little series. And it's really, it was created for Survivor Day. And it's just meeting with some of our local oncology professionals and trying to tackle some hot button nutrition topics. So today what we're going to be talking about is protein. And before we get started with our conversation, I just want to introduce a little recipe that I'm going to be preparing as Dr. Erickson and I have our chat. So we are going to be making something that is called scrambled tofu. It's a really easy recipe. Tofu would be the source of protein for this recipe. But what I always like to encourage people to do is surround your protein with a lot of other colorful foods. So I've done a little prep work ahead of time here, and I've got some diced up onion and some diced up peppers. For this recipe, the onions are going to go into the pan first, and we're just going to saute them. They take a little bit longer than the peppers, so those will go in second. We'll cut up the tofu, and I'm actually going to do this right now. So this is tofu. This is a great product, and I'm going to kind of put it right up next to the webcam here so you can see it. It's called, the brand name is Hiwa. It's spelled H-E-I-W-A. And this is actually an organic, non-GMO tofu that is made right in Maine. It's made in Rockport, Maine. And in my opinion, it's one of the best products on the market. It's very firm, which is ideal for tofu. From an expense point of view, the firmer the tofu you're using, the more water's been squeezed out. So you're getting more protein, the firmer the tofu product. And you can think of tofu as kind of like soy cheese. Tofu is to soy milk as cheese is to dairy milk. It's just a concentrated protein. And this is like a soft cheese. So you can see it, my knife just kind of cuts right through this product. And I'm going to try to squeeze a little bit more water out of it. And I'm only going to use half of this. I'm going to put some to the side here. So I've got a clean dish towel here. You could use paper towels if you wanted. I'm just going to press down on it and squeeze out some of the extra fluids. It'll just make for a better product. So my burner is already heating up here. Got my little home kitchen with turning it up. I had to turn it on early because this thing takes forever to heat up and we don't have that much time. So I'm using olive oil in the pan. Olive oil is a good healthy type of fat that you can use, has some good phytochemicals in it. So as long as you're not cooking at too high a heat, olive oil is a good choice. So we're going to saute the vegetables. My tofu's squeezed. I'm going to crumble that into the pan, and we'll talk about the rest of the recipe later on. So Dr. Erickson, protein. Everybody needs protein for sure. It just plays a lot of different roles in the body. In the cancer population, we know that, certainly for people who are in treatment, sometimes they experience some side effects to their treatment that really make eating a little bit of a challenge for them. But it's important for them to get protein. So I wonder if you can talk a little bit about that and just tell us, what you encounter and, if people aren't getting enough protein.
Right. So proteins are one of the most important building blocks of all the tissues in our body. And so it's particularly important for patients undergoing treatment for cancer to make sure they're getting enough protein to help them heal and to help kind of support the healing of their body, whether that's from surgery or radiation or chemotherapy. It's also important in supporting your immune system. And that's very important for people, particularly on chemotherapy. So I would compare the needs of a person receiving cancer treatment similar to the needs of an elite athlete. You know, the body's under a lot of stress and you need to support that.
Yeah, that's great. I've never thought of it along those lines, but it's true. And so their protein needs are actually higher during treatment than kind of the average person. Yeah. And so there's all kinds of different types of protein. You know, in some of the classes that we do, you know, we talk about the benefits of plant proteins. And, you know, it's not to suggest that people need to become vegetarian or anything like that. It's just that there are chemicals, plant chemicals in plant foods and the protein plants that have protective benefits in the body that you don't get from animal protein. So we do try, as we're, you know, certainly in survivorship, to help people learn how to incorporate some of the plant-based proteins into their diet, you know. So soy is certainly one of them, but legumes, all the different types of beans are great sources of protein. Nuts and seeds are good sources of protein. So there's a lot of places that you can get them. And a lot of those foods, in particular, the nuts and seeds, carry other nutrients and tend to make your food a little bit more interesting. So, you know, in terms of hot button nutrition topics, soy is something that people ask me about all the time. And I'm sure you get a lot of the same questions. There's a lot of information and perhaps misinformation out there about, you know, how potentially dangerous or beneficial soy might be to people in general, but in particular people in the cancer population. So, you know, what are your thoughts there?
Well, you know, the bulk of my practice relates to breast cancer, which is a disease that's very much linked to estrogen. And many women with breast cancer are aware that probably they want to try to avoid taking in supplements of estrogen. So for a long time, people were questioning what is the role of soy, because soy does contain chemicals within its makeup that can function as similar to estrogen. So that's where that term phytoestrogen comes from, meaning like a plant-based estrogen. So I think it was very natural for people to think, well, if I shouldn't be taking estrogen, maybe I shouldn't have soy because that may have some estrogen-like properties. But I think what we've learned is that that's actually not true. And if we look just globally, areas where soy consumption is the highest, which is Asia, is also the place where the incidence of breast cancer is the lowest. So I think we're growing in our understanding and evidence that soy may be possibly protective against that type of cancer. But not only that, once you've been diagnosed with breast cancer, there's also growing evidence that soy may be beneficial or helpful in that situation as well. And certainly we can say not harmful. So I think for people who enjoy tofu, who drink soy milk, who like incorporating those things in their diet, I don't think there's any reason to think that they shouldn't.
Yeah, that's great information. Thank you. And I would just add to that, that we definitely think, certainly if there's a beneficial component to soy, we think that that benefit is going to come from soy-based foods that are as close to their natural form as possible. So examples of that would certainly be tofu, edamame, which is the soybean itself, tofu, tempeh, which is the fermented soy product, soy milk, soy yogurt. So those are all sources of soy that are very close to their natural form. They're less processed, and they're going to contain some of those potentially beneficial chemicals. Examples of foods that, are more processed, there's a lot of soy protein powders. There's a lot of, high protein energy bars that have, concentrated soy in them. And is it harmful? Maybe not, probably not. Is it as beneficial as the natural forms? We don't think so. We don't think they're going to contain the same phytochemicals. So anything you want to add to that?
Well, no, just that I completely agree with that. I think there is not the same level of research or understanding about the impact of using what I think of as pharmaceutical doses of soy, right?
Right.
Concentrated soy. We just don't know as much about that. So I would just approach that with caution, and in general would endorse always eating things as close to their natural state as you can.
Yeah, great. So what I'm doing right now is I am just taking this tofu and I'm just crumbling it into the pan. This is you could take a potato masher and mash it up that way, but sometimes you just get your hands dirty. So I used about, a third of the brick of tofu, and that's easily going to be enough for 2 servings of this little breakfast. We can call it breakfast, or you could call this lunch. This works well as dinner too. So right now in my pan, I've got the onions and the peppers and the tofu. The tofu, you could eat it without cooking it. I don't recommend that. It really takes on the flavor of whatever you're cooking it with. So it'll take up some flavor from these vegetables, but I'm going to add a little bit more flavor and some color. So spices tend to be very concentrated sources of some protective phytochemicals. So if that's a new word for anybody in the audience, you just kind of break it down. Phyto meaning plant, chemicals, and they have some nice protective effects. And this is turmeric. Many of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with turmeric. It is known as a spice that has some very good anti-inflammatory properties. So, and this is also going to take this tofu and kind of shift it from a blandish white color to more of a yellow color. I would say it looks kind of like scrambled eggs, but if you put enough turmeric, it looks a little bit more fluorescent than scrambled eggs. But turmeric has some very good properties. So we're gonna, I put in about 1/4 teaspoon. We're gonna post the recipes that we make in this series at the website. So you'll be able to pop over there and get a copy if you would like. Now, turmeric is the nutrients that you get from turmeric. Curcumin is the anti-inflammatory nutrient that's been pretty heavily researched. It's not actually absorbed by the body very well. So one thing that you can keep in mind when you're using turmeric is also add a little bit of black pepper to whatever it is that you're making. So I'm just going to put a couple cranks of black pepper in here. There's a phytochemical in black pepper called piperine, and that helps the body absorb the curcumin that has those beneficial qualities to it. So this is looking pretty good. Give you guys a little look. It looks kind of like scrambled eggs here.
That looks delicious, Judy.
We're going to spice it up a little bit more, or spruce it up a little bit more, I should say. As I mentioned earlier, we like people to surround their protein with lots of colorful foods. So we've got the onions, which aren't that colorful, but red pepper, and then, any kind of greens that you have around. I've got a little bowl of spinach here, and I'm going to put a pretty generous handful. Because you know how greens are. They sort of start in a big pile, but then they shrink down to next to nothing. So I'm just going to mix this around in the pan, and those greens will kind of wilt down. You're not trying to overcook them. If your pan is too dry, sometimes just adding a little bit of water will help them to wilt, a little bit of water just being like a couple of teaspoons. But if you're patient, they're gonna wilt right down. So another question that I have for you, Dr. Erickson, is, what do? You're a busy person. Thank you for spending your Friday with us. What do you do to make sure that you get enough protein?
Well, I'm going to admit this is not a plant-based source of protein, but I'm a big fan of hard-boiled eggs because they're fairly quick and easy to prepare. They're very portable, and they really are packed with a lot of protein and I think some dense nutrition. So that for me is a big staple of my sort of on-the-go lunch routines or for snacks.
Yeah, I love that. And a nice thing about eggs and tofu as well is that, it can be, cancer is expensive, right? We can agree on that. People, it's just an expensive disease to treat and it can affect your food budget. So looking for foods that are quick and easy and inexpensive sources of protein is a great strategy to keep that food budget down. Eggs, very inexpensive. Plant-based proteins in general are less expensive. Tofu, pretty inexpensive. So I love the hard-boiled egg idea. And so here we have our colorful little, figure out where to hold this. And so let me grab a plate because I want to put in a plate for you. It's all about the presentation, right? Got a few other just last ingredients to dress this up. Oh, this really should be on a white plate. We got to work on that. So we've got a little salsa. I like a little bit of spice. So yeah, you could use ketchup if you wanted, but salsa is a nice way to spruce things up. So we'll put a little salsa on there. And then this is avocado. If you haven't used avocado too much when you're picking it out at the grocery store, you just want to give it a little squeeze. And if it just kind of like a tennis ball, if it's got a little bit of give to it, it's probably in a good place. If it's hard as a rock, just leave it on your counter for a few days. And when it starts to soften up, it'll be ready to go. But then once it's in a good place, you can just take that skin right off, peel right off. That's very much dependent on where it is in its ripeness. But avocado is a great source of healthy fat that also has some anti-inflammatory properties. So there you have it. Again, this is just needs to be on a white plate. We'll work on that for the next part of the series.
I would eat that for any meal of the day. That looks fabulous.
It's a great breakfast. So if you were having it for breakfast, you could have a piece of whole grain toast on the side. I like to take a wrap. Not whole grain. We're not perfect around here. But you could also just take this and tuck it into a wrap and roll it up, and it would make a really nice breakfast or lunch wrap. Pretty versatile dish. And as you can see, very quick and easy to make. So even in the evening when you're looking for just kind of a quick meal to throw together, this would be a nice one to keep in mind. So anything we want to add to this conversation?
No, I like how you're touching upon the things that are both easy and healthy and inexpensive. I think all of those things are important things for our patients because, as you've pointed out, they're under a lot of stress physically and emotionally. Time is important, managing your time and expending energy, efficiently and also the budget.
Yeah, and our people are tired. They're tired. So, I love what you're saying about being efficient, and you can develop some efficiency in the kitchen too. Like the peppers and onions are quick to add, and you could dice up a couple of onions and a couple of peppers when your energy is at its best. Keep them in a little container in your refrigerator, and then you can just add them to foods as the week goes on. So, a little bit of prep work when your energy level's at its best is a great strategy too.
It's also great for friends to do for someone if they're looking for a way to help somebody with cancer.
Yes, that is so true. And
meal prep.
when people ask you for something, if you think, wow, that recipe sounds pretty good, ask them to prep your vegetables for this recipe and drop them off at your house. Yeah, great. So Dr. Erickson, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Well, thanks for inviting me, Judy. That looks delicious. I wish I was there to enjoy it with you.
Should I do a taste test? That should be part of a cooking show, right? Let's see. I need a fork. It's always a little weird doing a taste test when you're by yourself. I'd much rather have a live audience that's here to do it with me, but give you some feedback. Really nice. Not too powerful in terms of the flavor, but some subtle combination of flavors that all work well together. And the salsa and the avocado just kind of make it. So have a great day, everybody. And keep your eyes open, because we've got other components of this nutrition series coming up for Survivor Week. Take good care.